Hello and welcome to Everyday Strengths. I'm Trey Gamage, joined today by Greg Moffit, the Director of Principal Development at DC Public Schools. Everyday Strengths is designed to highlight how leaders effectively leverage their strengths on an everyday basis. Now, Greg, I know that your title is Director of Principal Development, but maybe give me the informal title a little bit. What do you get paid to do?
I get paid to do an incredibly awesome job. I feel so lucky that I get to work with school leaders in DC public schools. So, primarily, I work with our first year principals and assistant principals and make sure that they feel supported in the job. That first year as a school leader is eye opening. It can be challenging. It can be difficult. It can be really exciting and inspiring. So I get to work with our first years. I also get to develop and design programs for our veteran school leaders as well, and make sure that folks feel supported along their career pathway in our school district.
Hmm. You made that sound really simple, but when you have 100 schools and 4,500 teachers, there's a lot of planning that goes into all that. You've been in the role for I think a year or two now. What was it like to transition? You were a former principal yourself to maybe owning a school or department to being over such an important role in such a large district.
I was a school principal in a district of about 15,000 students and 17 schools. So I thought I thought DC was going to be a little bit bigger, right? We've got like almost 50,000 students, 117 schools. So it's it's large, right? And there
Mhm.
are so many incredible things going on here, that the size and scale was just eye-opening to me. Really, there are so many different schools here in the district, um, that are really community based, right? They take the shape and the size of the neighborhood that they're
Yeah.
in, that they're serving, and they really reflect the community that the school is situated in.
That's a powerful reflection, and I could think about. I mentioned to you that I worked with a couple DC schools or visited a couple schools, and that's not only is that something you see, but that it seems encouraged now that you mention it in that way. When I've visited the schools, their neighborhood schools, their local schools. I'm in more rural South, so folks are having to travel further ways to get to their school, miles, sometimes counties away. So that's pretty special to be able to have folks directly or folks that are able to go to school in their neighborhood. When
DC is really incredible that way, right? Like, you get to go to your neighborhood school, but DC is also this network of choice, right? And
hmm,
so you will have families that will travel across the district to the other side to go to a school
okay,
that matches what they want for their kid, um, what they feel is going to be the best education for their child. And
right.
so it's this mix of, we've got to make sure that every child has access to an incredible school in their neighborhood, and also that they have opportunities and choices across the district.
Mm. So where does that makes a lot of sense when you think about supporting 116 principals from new principals, aspiring principals, veteran principals. What kind of team does it take to support all your principals? Obviously, I know you have several departments, but I guess focus more on your team or your department.
Yeah, so I work in our recruitment, selection, and development division. And the idea is that as we're hiring principals and we are onboarding them and bringing them into the district, and assistant principals, that they feel supported and that they have opportunities to grow. And that our veteran principals also see pathways for their growth and development and their support. So we're one part of it. And so our division is a team of about 11 right now, that handles recruitment and selection, but also leadership development programming at the same time for both our current principals and our aspiring principals and school leaders too. Then there's the Office of Schools, which has our instructional superintendents and they're the ones that supervise the principals. And they also take a very supportive role. They are mentoring and coaching principals as well. They were all former school leaders themselves. And then in addition, we have a cluster support team. So those 116 schools are broken into 9 different clusters. Not necessarily by geographic area in the city, but kind of they cut across different areas and different wards in DC. And that cluster support team kind of works with the superintendent and wraps around the school leader and the staff to make sure that there's content and curriculum specialists and folks that can specialize on English language learners and students with disabilities, and that those principals and those schools in that cluster are getting the support that they need too. So, our division is one piece of a much larger network of school support here in DCPS.
So hearing you break that down, it's kind of a three-pronged approach from the recruitment, selection, retention to the superintendents to the clusters. How do you collaborate with those other divisions versus how do you collaborate with the actual principals without stepping on each other's toes?
A lot of meetings, right? A lot of meetings and a lot of listening, right? That's, I think, really what it takes to make sure that we're all in alignment. We have a strategic plan here in DC Public Schools that is sort of like our guidepost. It is the thing that we are going back to. It has that's one equity imperative, two commitments to the people and the community that we serve, and then core values, and three strategic priorities. So we are focused on those things in all of our programming, in all of the training that we're doing, and all the professional learning opportunities that we provide, and all the conversations. We are going back to that equity imperative, those commitments to our core values, and the three strategic priorities, which is really about students succeeding academically, folks feeling connected to schools, and folks feeling prepared and ready for whatever comes next in their educational journey.
Yeah, that's impressive, Greg. That's impressive, Greg, and well said to be able to support so many schools and so many divisions. It's obviously going to take a lot of effort and work, and it sounds like y'all are doing a wonderful job with making that happen. As I was doing some research and preparing for the day, I saw that you all had a leadership framework, and you can correct me. I saw that there were several programs; these may have changed, but I saw the Inspiring Leadership, the Leaders in Innovation, the RISE principal residency, and other programs that you have. Can you kind of speak to your leadership framework and how these frameworks are supporting your principles?
Yeah, so DCPS has a leadership framework for school leaders, which sort of defines what we feel are the things that effective school leaders should be doing. They're like 6 pieces of a pie, right? And the biggest piece of that pie is instructional leadership. We are um, really focused on making sure that our principals and our assistant principals know what good instruction looks like, and how to really support teachers in delivering really good instruction. And so, instructional leadership, that's a huge piece of the pie. Equally important are the family and community engagement pieces of the pie, and the school culture and climate pieces. We want schools where community members and family members feel welcome, and we want schools where the students and staff in those schools feel welcome and that they belong. So, also incredibly important. Another piece of the pie: school leaders have to understand how to manage the operations of the building, the budget, the hiring and staffing, and that leads then into talent development and management, making sure folks are growing, are continuously improving, and getting better at their jobs in service of kids. And then the final piece of the pie is personal leadership. Those quote unquote soft skills that aren't really that soft. They're those essential skills that leaders need to have: the ability to communicate, the ability to collaborate, the ability to creatively problem solve. And at the end of the day, the ability to really think about the kids who are furthest from opportunity, and to be that equity centered leader, and ensure that those opportunity gaps are closed.
Mm. Yeah, that's strong. I think a framework is it gives you a baseline for how we can grow and how we can develop the people that we're working with. I might be having some a little technical difficulties. I'm gonna try to keep working through it though. It looks like I'm a little choppy. Greg, as you think about your leadership, when you prepared for this interview, you listed your Clifton Strengths top five. Talk to me about how you have worked on developing yourself to get in this position and be aware enough of yourself and of your strengths to be an effective leader.
My first principal position was in a 1,500 school district in a small rural town out in Northern California. Very different than DC. Um, that superintendent um, really wanted us to understand our strengths and the strengths of the folks that we were working with. So, um, all of the principals in the district, there were four of us,
Hmm.
along with the district leadership team, um, would come together weekly. We all took the Clifton Strengths Finder test, and every week we would start off by talking about how our strengths had shown up that week, which strength we were really leaning into to
Hmm.
address a problem of practice. And we talked with every single member of that leadership team, so we knew where every single person was, what they were focused on. So for me as a strategic leader, that was my number one. Um, it was really seeing how we could use these strengths to leverage them and to move the district forward in a really thoughtful and intentional way.
Right.
I think it was one of the first times where I had a boss that was really focused on helping us understand who we were as a
Hmm.
leader, and helping us reflect on it and use that to grow and move, not only our leadership forward but our schools forward and the district forward.
Yeah, Greg, I feel like it's such a shame that this work is so secondary and tertiary to under yourself. The fact that it's so rare to have a leader who wants to develop leaders. I think that's just interesting to me, and I think it's a hard pill to swallow. So thank you for doing the work to work on yourself and then work on others, because that's the way that we really do end up getting better. Um, to prepare for our conversation, you complete one of my assessments. I use DISC assessments, and these are a way to help us get clear the same way or similarly to the ways that you do with a strengths finders assessment. A little bit of a difference that we have here is we're focused on communication styles. And so your communication style came up as a dynamo. Let's see if I can get you pulled up here. And I can imagine that you'd have to be very dynamic in a role of principal development. So dynamos bring rapid decisiveness, high sense of urgency, and wide base of people interaction to the projects they engage. Like the name, they have the ability to captivate and inspire others with their self-confidence and enthusiasm. Goals are met because dynamos are able to attract others to come on board with their ideas. Their energy levels is contagious, and they can lead a large or small group with equal skill and persuasion. Some may say they're being pushed as a result of the dynamo's high energy. Greg, does this ring true with you? And if so, how?
Uh, I remember a former assistant superintendent who would often tell me to slow my roll, because I was this high energy force, right? That would just show up and speak my mind and lead the rally or the assembly, or do this crazy event, or come dressed in this spirit day outfit. Yeah, so it really is describing that sort of upfront, high energy leader that I think sometimes you have to be in the role, right? We're
Hmm.
called on often as leaders to be in front of folks, and to really bring an energy and a passion, and I think sometimes a sense of urgency, right? We need to improve outcomes for kids,
Yeah.
right? We need to help more kids learn how to read and write, and solve math problems and communicate and solve some really complex problems in the world, right? So the kids are counting on us, right? So for me, this dynamic sort of leadership speaks to where I sort of naturally lead, right? I'm not
Mm.
shy to share my opinion. I will definitely share it and speak out. And I think sometimes I will bring that energy to whatever situation. Um, it's it's gotten me in trouble sometimes, right? It's also not maybe always been the thing that was always needed in every situation, right? And
Mm.
so as I sort of grew in my leadership as a school principal, I think it was realizing that that was my natural tendency was to be the one in front, the one up there, the one leading the charge, and that wasn't always
Wow.
the right move to make.
Mm.
So yeah, that describes me though.
I resonate with that's a well said story, and thank you for sharing it. I can remember being the dean of students at a K-12 charter school, and I remember my executive director said, Trey, if there's a door right there, but you'd rather run through a brick wall. It's okay to slow down and open up the door, man. You can walk through it instead of busting through these walls. And it was actually a situation when I had an administrator that was very challenging to me that woke me up to recognize, like, okay, Trey, like you can't be a one trick pony. You've got to be adaptable. And the in my case, I was not very detail oriented. So I was challenged to bring those details to my administrative role, which was still appropriate. But it took me some maturing to be able to recognize some of those skills that I was not naturally gifted at and how to leverage those a little better as well.
For me, being so high energy would drain me and
Mm,
it would leave me exhausted at the end of the day. It often meant that I was doing it alone and I was the one up there in front. And I realized pretty quickly I was going home with like my tank was empty all the time.
yeah.
And so I had very little left to give my wife, my daughter, right? Because I was drained, like I was on all day long, and so I realized a few years in that wasn't going to be sustainable. That might be the natural way I wanted to lead and do things, but I needed to shift some
Mhm.
things. Um, and I still constantly to this day have to think, okay, what is needed in this moment? What might be a different way of leading?
Yeah, man, Greg, this is very powerful stuff. So you mentioned also again in the intake process, you mentioned that delegation is something that you're working on. I feel like that's a continuation of this process. You said I feel like I'm doing it alone, or I'm kind of burnt out of energy. Those are also kind of I guess signs or pieces of maybe I need to delegate a little more. Talk to me about how you're continuing to work on that.
I mean, my second Clifton Strengths Finder strength is responsibility, right? So
Mhm.
like I shoulder it, right? I take on that burden, right? I feel like I can't let the staff down. I can't let the kids down, right? And so um realizing that I was letting myself down and my family down
Mm,
and the kids down and the staff down if I didn't empower others to help me, if I didn't ask the teacher to help lead the morning meeting or the morning assembly, if I didn't find ways to have staff lead the professional development, if I didn't bring staff to the PTA meeting with me to speak about the stuff that we were doing and why we needed the funds to do the thing or to talk with parents about what was going on at school, if I didn't ask someone else to take the pictures of the events and post it on social media,
mm,
I didn't do that. I was making it all about me instead of about our school. Um, it's still something that I'm constantly struggling with, right? How can I elevate the voices of others? How can I
mhm.
include more voices in the process? But that is the thing I know I need to work on. So I'm always thinking about it. So for example, I support all the first year principals here in DCPS. I was never a principal in DCPS, right?
Mm,
I can coach a principal, I can help them reflect, I can listen to them, I can problem solve with them, I can offer ideas, I can collaborate, but I haven't been that job. So one of the things that we intentionally did this year was to partner every first year principal with a veteran principal in
mm,
DC. Someone in the role, someone doing the job right now. And every
yeah,
time we get all the first year principals together, we also bring in veteran principals to speak to the group because it can't just be about my voice and my role as the
mm,
leadership coach. I feel it's really important to elevate the voices of the principals who are in the role doing the work right
mm,
now, who have years of experience in this district, who know this city, who know these families, who know these kids, who who know what it takes to do the job here in this context. And
yeah,
so that's kind of my way of getting better at delegation, but it's hard, right? Like I'm turning over this professional learning experience um, to other people. It
mhm.
takes time, it takes collaboration, it takes trust. But at the end of the day, I think it makes for a much better um, experience for the people that I'm ultimately trying to support.
I think so too, Greg, and I can see that in your results as well. This second page is a words, or excuse me, a bar graph version of your results. So you saw that you were a dynamo. This is showing you what a dynamo looks like in bar graph form. And so on your natural side, Greg, you can see what we're talking about. Naturally, this red is a D style. D styles are problem solvers. They're assertive. They're going to get stuff done and ask for forgiveness later, right? So you're there, but you've got some that's the I style that's outgoing, and this is making sure everybody's along for the ride. So you actually are pretty flexible naturally. You just lead with solving problems. But what I see on your adapted style, you are much more outgoing and well, based on what you're saying, I see your efforts on this chart. This yellow is focused on steadiness, consistency, making sure that there's a consensus before we're making a decision. And so, based on what you're saying, obviously you're putting a lot of time into this I style, being people oriented and fast paced, but you're also being intentional about slowing down and making sure that everybody's on the same page before we make a decision. Am I reading into that right? Is that how does that show up for you?
It is definitely the thing that I've learned makes the process better, right?
Mm,
I can go it alone, right? I can get up there and lead the professional development. I can, be the dynamic upfront leader. I feel like ultimately I get better results, right? When I'm doing it side by side, folks, when I'm bringing people along, when I'm including their voices, their ideas. Um, am I going to be afraid to speak my mind and say what needs to be said? Absolutely not.
mm,
Once again, like there are kids that need to learn how to read, right? We have to improve outcomes for kids.
right.
Um, but I feel like I need to do that with people and not to people. Um, and that's been, I think, the biggest lesson I've learned in working in schools for the past. I think this is my 20th year.
Wow.
The past 20 years.
Wow. I love it. I find that I've worked with over 100 school districts at this point in multiple different capacities. And I find that successful schools, districts, or leaders are either leaders that are ultra self aware just naturally from the way they were brought up, from the sport they played, or whatever, or there's also leaders that really work and they really put effort into building up their leadership capacity. But either way, they recognize the priority to develop those skills and trickle them down into the rest of their building. Now, I would also be a proponent of, I say, person first professional development. So whenever
Mm,
I'm working with students or Zig Ziglar, Jim Rohn, they say if you are to get $1 million, you better become a person worth $1 million so that you can keep it. You have to become the person, not just get the thing. You mentioned earlier that the way that you were leading, meant that you were drained when you got home. How has your adaptations as a leader helped you become a better version of yourself and leverage those strengths at home differently than the way that you're leveraging them in the workplace?
Mm. One is a conscious effort to leave work at work as much as I can. Um, that doesn't always happen, right? There are cycles, there are seasons of sacrifice as a leader, right? The first week of school, you're going to be working at school. That
Yeah.
last week of school, you're going to be working at school. But there are also seasons and cycles where family has to be the priority, right? And so for me, one of the things was just clearing my mind of this idea that there was such a thing as work life balance. There was no such thing as work life balance. It was not going to be 50-50 balanced every day of the week, every week of the year, right? It's about cycles of balance, seasons of balance. Better said, probably work life fit, how it fits together and how you make it work. Um, and then I think it's also a realization that a lot of these leadership skills are skills that don't stop at work, right? I can be an empathetic person, human at home in a conversation with my
Yeah.
wife,
Yeah.
right? With my teenage daughter, right? It's so easy to just want to tell my daughter, this is what you should do to solve the problem. And it's much better if I just listen and stay curious for just a little bit to hear what she's thinking and to say, how might you solve the problem, right? The same ways I talk with teachers, right? And parents and
Yeah.
kids, I can do that at home, right? So as I've learned these skills, um, realizing that yes, work can stay at work, but also the skills are just human skills, are life skills. It's about hearing people and seeing people, and making sure people feel understood and valued and appreciated.
Well said, Greg. You're a very good speaker. I don't know if you knew that, but you have very good statements and stories that you're bringing up here. And I think that is a wonderful way to bring all that together. You know, you spent so much time, or we spent so much time talking about the work and career. And I think the way that you just thoughtfully brought that together and bringing that back home, that's a step that we miss. You know, the idea of leveraging strengths and everyday strengths is this is not rocket science. This is not a special curriculum. This is how we live our life. And so, things that you mentioned today to highlight for folks listening too, you mentioned effort, you mentioned intentionality, you mentioned practice, you mentioned asking for help. Like none of those things require resources outside of yourself. It starts with that intentionality and awareness of self. So if you can get those two things, awareness and intention, you've got growth that can take place. Greg, what message do you have for folks that are listening, aspiring principals, veteran principals, since you are working with so many of them?
I'll quote something that Dr. Bob Bees, he is a professor of management at the Georgetown McDonough School of Business, says to our assistant principals in our leadership and innovation program. He says, "You can't go it alone. You won't go it alone." And it's always remembering that the people you are privileged enough to lead, the folks that you are serving and supporting, um, should be part of the process.
Mm,
And that in order to lead a school, a business, an organization, um, you've got to do it collaboratively and inclusively. So don't go it alone. You won't go it alone. Um, and and then find someone to help you, right? Like the principal down the street,
mm,
the principal in another district, the principal that you used to work for. Call
mm.
them, ask for help. Don't go it alone.
I love it. I love it. Thank you so much, Greg, for showing up, for being vulnerable, for sharing your strengths, for sharing some vulnerabilities and talking to them with everybody. If you're interested in learning more about your everyday strengths, you can visit everydaystrengths.com to learn more about our leadership cohort. You'll be able to take an assessment similar to Greg and begin to assess your leadership effectiveness so you can be better for yourself and for others in your role. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next time on Everyday Strengths.